Between 800 and 1100, a lot of people from Scandinavia left to find better lives elsewhere. The Vikings, also called Northmen or Norsemen, attacked British coastal towns and churches that weren't well protected. Over the next 300 years, they lived in much of Britain, Europe, Iceland, Greenland, and Newfoundland as pirates, raiders, traders, and farmers. In spite of what most people think, the Vikings were not a race with a common origin or sense of pride. Most people know about the Vikings from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, but there were also Finns, Estonians, and Saamis. They were from a different country, weren't civilized in the way people here thought of it, and, most importantly, weren't Christians. Here are 8 scary things about how the famous Vikings lived. Excessive murders distorted the gender ratio. In the year 793, Norwegian Vikings attacked the Lindisfarne Abbey in northeastern England. This was the start of the Viking Age. Until 1066, the Vikings attacked the shores of Europe. One idea says that the Viking male-to-female ratio was messed up by killing babies based on their gender. Some experts think that the main reason the Vikings took over Europe wasn't so they could steal things. They wanted to get married instead. DNA tests done on modern Icelanders back up this idea. They looked at your mitochondria, which come from your parents. Iceland was settled by the Vikings more than 1,000 years ago, and since then, not many people have moved there. So experts were able to figure out where Iceland's first residents came from. Based on what they found, about 80% of Iceland's male settlers came from Norway, while 63% of Iceland's female settlers came from the British Isles. That would mean that a lot of Norwegian men and women from the areas where the Vikings came over bred. It seems unlikely that the women moved to Iceland by themselves. Soup as medicine. Viking fights were often bloody and violent, so Viking women learned a lot about how to treat war wounds. Viking women in particular had a way to tell how bad a cut or stab wound was. They would make a stew for the hurt soldier with onions, leeks, and herbs. After they ate it, the women could smell the cut. When they smelled the pot, they thought the wound was too bad to fix. Even though the dying fighter was close to dying, the women wouldn't do anything to help him get better. They would only spend their time and money on troops who could use their medicine. Home gangs. The rules of the Vikings were very different from ours. It was against the law to hurt a high-status person, but sometimes it was okay to kill. In a murder case, the murderer could be killed by the family of the victim. This made groups fight with each other over and over again. Home gangs were another way to solve problems. The home gang was not a group of bad guys named after the star Ian Holm. In some of these fights, people lost their lives. Someone felt wronged by someone else, so they asked them to a duel. The fight had to happen within a week of the challenge, and if it couldn't, a different challenge could be used instead. Before the fight started, the challenger had to read the rules, which were different in each place. The rules said which weapons could be used, how many shields could be used, who could strike first, how the winner would be chosen, and what the winner would get. In fact, there were times when the only way to stop the home gang was to kill one of the fighters. If the person who was challenged didn't show up for the fight, they were seen as guilty. If the crime was bad enough, anyone could have a valid reason to kill the person who did it. So, a slave could legally kill the clan chief if he didn't show up for a fight. Blood sports. Since the Vikings liked blood sports, their games make UFC look like dancing. Viking games were dangerous and could kill you. One of the games they played was a swimming race, though we use the word swimming in a very loose way. The point of the game was for each man to see how long he could keep his opponent underwater. Men probably died because they couldn't reach safety. In a different game, 2 teams fight over a ball in a full-contact version of Keep Away. Even though the game was known for being violent, it was only played once a year in the fall. The Viking society also put a lot of value on wrestling as a sport. Even when they weren't raiding settlements, it helped them stay in shape and ready for war. As if the games themselves weren't dangerous enough, fights and brawls could happen at any time. On one account, a group of boys were playing a game. After getting roughed up by another child during a game, a 6-year-old boy used an axe to kill him. If the fights weren't solved on the field, they could also turn into blood feuds that last for years. Because of how violent the games were, one fighter who could still fight in battle had to sit on the sidelines and watch. Pagan sacrifices. On the winter solstice, the Arabic explorer Al-Tartucci saw a blot. He wrote, "They hold a festival where everyone gets together to worship the god and eat and drink." This ritual happened 4 times a year, on the winter solstice, the spring equinox, the summer solstice, and the fall equinox. In it, a sacrifice animal is tied to stakes at the farm's door, and the person who killed it is in charge of taking the head off. He must do this for the sake of his god, and so that everyone can see his sacrifice. Some tributes were just things or money, but some gods, like Odin, Lord of Valhalla, often wanted a real sacrifice to match their status as gods. There is a lot of archaeological proof that both animals and people were hung and killed at Ånshold, which is short for Odin's Holt, which means Odin's Wood. In the saga of Håkon the Good, son of Harald Fairhair, a lot is said about a big blot offering. At a nearby temple, many animals, mostly horses, would be killed, and their blood would be thrown on the temple walls and on the people who were there. The meat was killed and made holy, and then everyone ate it with joy while toasting the gods, starting with Odin. In the Norse story, the Hervarar saga, blood from a horse was used to decorate a holy tree in Uppsala. The festival of Hestag. Hestag, a horrible fight between 2 stallions, is thought to have started in Norway during the Viking Age, especially in the Icelandic Commonwealth between 930 and 1262 CE. Hestag was the center of Viking life and culture. Horses fight over mates in the wild, and the Hestag is an artificial form of this. The fighting showed how strong the horses were and helped find the best ones to breed. When presenting 2 stallions to a mare in heat in the past, a ringed area was used to keep the stallion from running away, which is what would normally happen in nature. The pregnant mare would then be chained in the middle of the pen, or sometimes outside, but still close enough for the other horses to smell her, to make them fight over her. If the horses didn't want to fight for any reason, they would be lashed or startled until they did. When rounds were added to stop the animals from hurting each other all the time, the Hestag was said to take anywhere from 15 minutes to more than 3 hours, and it usually finished with a participant badly hurt or dead. The terrifying Eric the Red. The Vikings were fierce fighters who were committed to their cause and often used violence. But Eric Thorvaldsson was too mean. Eric was born in Norway in the year 950. When he was young, his father was sent away for murder, and Eric and his family moved to Iceland. Eric's name comes from the fact that he has red hair and is very tough. Around the year 980, he would lose his anger. Eric's workers caused a landslide in Haukadale, Iceland, which damaged the house of Eric's neighbor. Eyjolf the Foul, who was related to the man, killed the slaves as punishment. Eric killed Eyjolf and a clan guard because he was angry. Eric was sent away because Eyjolf's family wanted him to do the right thing. Eric and his family moved to the north, but they didn't leave Iceland. On the island of Oxney, they set up a farm. Once they were settled in, Fran the Dueler, a new neighbor who was building a house, asked Eric if he could borrow some morally important wood beams. Eric agreed, but Fran said no when he went to get them. In the fight that followed, 2 of Fran's kids and several of his friends died. Eric was sent away again. The first people to live in Greenland were Eric and his family. When his time in hiding was over, he went back to Iceland and tried to get other people to go to Greenland. 2 villages were built, and Eric and his family lived there for the rest of their lives. About 500 years before Columbus, his son Leif Erikson was the first European to sail to North America and set up bases. The Blood Eagle. Given how bad Viking society was, it's not surprising that they're blamed for creating the Blood Eagle, one of the cruelest and most painful ways to kill someone. This was a method of killing in which the victim's lungs were ripped out and hung over his shoulders to make it look like he had wings through the hole made by the brutality. The Blood Eagle is only mentioned twice in the Norse stories that we still have, but it is mentioned in other places. Both of the people who were killed were members of the royal family. One of the sons killed them to get back at the person who killed their father, which shows that this way of killing was only used for important people. Halfdan Haaleg, also known as Halfdan Longleg, was sacrificed to Odin by Torf Einar. Einar made them carve an eagle on his back with a sword. and removed the ribs all from the backbone and dragged the lungs there out and presented him to Odin for the victory he had won. In 867 CE, Ivar the Boneless killed Ella of Northumbria for killing his father, the famous Viking chieftain Ragnar Lodbrok, as told in The Tale of Ragnar's Sons. After a fight in York, they carved the bloody eagle on Law's back, took all of his ribs from his spine, and then ripped out his lungs, the story says. The Vikings really did live up to their reputation for being cruel. We hope you liked this video. Subscribe to the channel if you're a history addict, and please let us know about civilization or time period we should talk about. Also watch another video here.